Today in Algebra 1B we are going to be dealing with using the quadratic formula, which means that we are going to have to really be focused on the kind of quadratic equation that we need to make this work. So let me show you what we're talking about here. First of all, they're going to want us to use and base things on this basic quadratic equation that we've had before. Now, kind of two things that you need to be aware of. One of them is that there's a 0 here, so I have to have 0 here to be able to make this work. And notice that this ax squared plus bx plus c is something we've been doing before. So this a that's here is going to get used in this formula down here that we call the quadratic formula twice. It's going to get used once in the top and once in the bottom. This b value that we have here is going to get used here. Notice this says negative b, so the opposite of b, kind of like when we were dealing with the line of symmetry. There's also going to be a b value here that's squared. This c value that's here is going to go through here only once. So in this formula that we have, there's a lot of things in here that look similar to things we've been dealing with before. This negative b looks like the negative b part that was in the line of symmetry in the top of that fraction. Plus or minus and square roots we dealt with in 10.3. So this is going to give us a small picture into what we're doing. So let's take a look at an example so I can help you kind of figure out how to solve this. First of all, it says solve using the quadratic formula using this equation here. Now first of all, there is a 0, so I don't have to move anything around. I'm going to add a 1 here just to kind of help myself out. And actually, I'm going to put my document camera underneath here for just a minute so you can see a little bit of what I'm doing to kind of give us a bigger field to look at. So if I were going to go solve this, my first job is going to be to identify A, B, and C. That's what I'm going to start with. So I'm looking at A, B, and C. Let me zoom in a little bit here. So in this equation that we have right here, a would be 1 because that's the value that's in front of the x squared. B is going to be negative 2. And C is going to be negative 8. So now my job is, in this equation that we were just talking about, to plug the values in where they need to go. Now I'm just going to choose a different color so you can see this. But wherever these A's are at, I'm going to put a 1 in here. C is negative 8. My B value right there is negative 2. And this one's going to be the one that's challenging because it's negative B, so the opposite of B. So if B is negative 2, then I'm going to put a positive 2 in that spot. So when I start to do this equation, it starts to look like this. X equals 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 8 over 2 parentheses 1. So I'll tell you, that's a lot of stuff going on. So really, what we want to think about to kind of make things easier is this part that we have down here underneath the square root, kind of coloring that a different color so you can see it a little better. Let me move this in a little bit. That part underneath there, I want to get down to one number. So actually, ignoring the square root, I would take this and put that in my calculator just the way it's written. So parentheses negative 2 squared minus 4, parentheses 1, parentheses negative 8. If I do that, I end up with 36. Let me scoot this a little bit so you can see it. And the bottom of this 2 times 1 is just going to be 2. Now, good thing for us, the square root of 36 is a perfect square. It's just going to be 6. So that means that this would become x equals 2 plus or minus 6 over 2. Now, in a problem like that, the plus or minus part that's in the middle right here, I'm actually going to take this and split this into two equations. So watch what happens. The first time I'm going to plus it, and the second time I'm going to subtract it. Let me get a little further out so you can see a little better. So if that's true, 2 plus 6 will be 8. Divided by 2 would be 4. 2 minus 6 is negative 4. Divided by 2 is negative 2. And these two pieces are my actual answers. So if I want to go through and actually deal with that answer, I'm going to have to take that 4 and 2 and actually put it right back in the equation. Make sure it fits. So here's my equation. I'm going to check it by plugging in 4. And if I do that, I want to put this right in my calculator. So I'm going to pull down my calculator right now. Parentheses 4 squared minus 2 parentheses 4 minus 8. So I'm actually typing the whole thing in, and I hit enter, and it equals 0. So that means that this answer checks out. So x equals 4 is absolutely one of the answers that we have. Now the other thing that I need to do is to check the negative 2 that I think is an answer here. So that means I'm going to do the same thing. And I'm going to plug in negative 2. Try to put my calculator underneath here so you can see it. So parentheses negative 2 squared minus 2 parentheses negative 2 minus 8. Oh wait, might have to square it there. Sorry. I hit my 2 and thought it went up. Minus 2 parentheses negative 2 minus 8. There we go. So you can see how you end up with a 0 there. So that means that this answer checks out. So that means x equals negative 2 is also an answer. So you actually have two answers there. Now it's really important that you actually check your answers, because you could easily solve something up here that won't be able to check out down here, and it will narrow down what your answer is. Okay, so let's take a look at the next one. Move my document camera out of the way here. Let's look at the next one. Now this one kind of has an issue because there is no 0. So that means that I'm going to have to move this 5x on the other side. So if I assume that it's positive, I'm going to subtract 5x from both sides. Once I do, when I put this together, I want it to be in standard form. So that means it's going to have to be x squared minus 5x plus 6 equals 0. Once I'm here, then I'm identifying my pieces. So A is 1, B is negative 5, and C is 6. So again, here's my equation. And I'm actually going to show you where each of the pieces go. So let's see. This spot right here is going to be 1. This A is going to be 1. C is going to be 6. This B value right there is going to be negative 5. But then remember, the opposite of B is going to be the opposite of this sign B. So instead of being negative 5, that means here I'm going to plug in positive 5. So let's start plugging our stuff in. So 5 plus or minus negative 5 squared minus 4 times 1 times 6 all over 2 times 1. So as I'm looking at this problem, first thing that I probably want to consider is this part right here. Because if I can get that down to one number, that makes my problem a lot easier to solve. Because in front it's just going to be 5, it's going to be plus or minus, and then in the bottom 2 times 1 is just going to be 2. So this is a pretty straightforward problem when you're looking at it from that aspect. So I'm going to go and take this part and put it all into my calculator. So parentheses negative 5 squared minus 4, parentheses 1, parentheses 6. And I end up getting 1. And so that really means that if I were to do the square root of 1, that would just be 1. Now remember, once I get it kind of simplified, then one time I'm going to do my adding, and one time I'm going to do my subtracting. So 5 plus 1 is 6, divided by 2 would be 3. 5 minus 1 is 4, divided by 2 is 2. So these are what I think my two answers are. Now don't forget that means that you've got to plug them back into your original equation, which was this, and make sure it works. So we're going to check the 3. Oops, meant to write equal there. So I'm going to check 3. I am also going to check 2. So 3 squared is 9, and 9 plus 6 is 15. And then 3 times 5 is 15. So that checks out. So the 3 is good. On this one, 2 squared is 4, plus 6 would be 10, and 5 times 2 is 10. So that means x equals 2 is good. So here are 2 answers. Now let's see if we can get in there one example where you don't have a perfect square root here. On a problem like this, we know automatically it's not going to be easy to do because it's telling you to round to the 100th. So let's see if we can fit this on here before the end of our time. A is 2, B is 4, and C equals negative 7. So I'm just going to start by actually putting them in. So negative B would be negative 4 plus or minus 4 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 7. And on the bottom, it's going to be another 2 down there because A is 2. So if I go through and start to solve this, first part's kind of easy. The bottom is 4. But I want to take this part right here and put it in my calculator. So if I do, I end up getting 72, which is not a perfect square. So once I get it down to one number, even though this isn't a perfect square, I want you to see the easiest way here. Still go through and do one time adding, and one time subtracting. But this is the point where you want to do that. You don't want to change that square root of 72 before you have to. So negative 4 plus the square root of 72, and then hit equals, and then do divided by 4, and I end up with 1.12. Then negative 4 minus the square root of 72, hit equals, then divided by 4, equals negative 3.12. Now, if I had time, I'd actually plug them both in and show you that it works. But because we're almost out of time here, I'm going to put both our answers together so we can deal with that.